Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of EdTech Connect Innovators in Conversation. Today we are joined with the CEO of DeweyLearn, Luyen Chou, co-founder, and we are with Dipesh again for another episode. So welcome back, Dipesh, and hello, Luyen.
Hello, how are you? Nice to see you. Nice to see you both.
Yes, nice to see you, Kiara. Luyan, nice to see you again. Thank you.
Great. So we're going to jump in with one lightning round question just to get us having some fun conversation before we get super serious. The first one is because we are all in New York City area. So if you had to describe what your New York City vibe is, are you a warm gust of the subway air, a subway rat, or a pigeon? Lewin,
No.
what is your New York City vibe?
I am probably I aspire to fresh gust of air, but I probably am more realistically the city
The
rat.
city rat. Okay. It's always an interesting question. Dipesh, first time you're
Uh,
answering this question as well.
I am, and I aspire to be a city rat. I just, hidden somewhere. I don't want to, don't want to be spotted. So that's what I am.
So we're both of yours. So the subway rats is what we're hearing. Okay.
Yes.
All right, cool. Yeah. No, last time I asked this question, I got introduced to the subway gust of air. So there's always something new for this one. But all right, now we're going to get into the serious side of the conversation. And we're talking about this idea of multimodal AI going to the next level of data interpretation and application to unlock the true learning potential for every learner at every age. And I know, Lou, when you attended our summit, I had the a possibility to listen to some of your keynote in between running around. And I was fascinated because this is a new concept for me. So, we're going to start it off by just giving a very surface level definition of what multimodal AI is and how you would describe it to someone who's never heard of it before.
Yeah, sure. And good question. So I think of multimodal AI as AI systems that are capable of both understanding not just semantic content, text, but um, audio content and visual content. So, if a student says 5 times 3 is 15, that's very different than if they say 5 times 3 is 15, even though the semantics are the same. And similarly, if a child says, 5 times 3 is 15, that's very different than if they say 5 times 3 is 15. And so, when we interact as humans, and this is why we're on a video screen and not just doing this by text, that multi-sensory information provides a lot of insight value. And then I think people also more typically think of multimodal AIs as AIs that actually can also then express themselves in multiple forms of media and not just text. So we have a lot of image generation and video generation and audio generation tools now. And I really think, we will look back in a year or two from now and think how quaint it was that most of our communications with generative AI were via text. I don't think that will be the case for much longer.
Mhm. Yeah, as we know, AI is generating so fast these days and evolving. I'm imagining, I've talked to someone about this, but we're at the surface level of it. Really soon, we're going to get to that invisible level. We're so integrated that we don't even feel it or see it anymore. So, this is going to be an interesting topic today. I'm excited to get into it, especially in terms of context as a former teacher and also someone who is very into linguistics in the context of it, how all of this exterior information really does influence how we gear our lessons and influence the learner. So let's start with the big question in the room. Education has been collecting this data for years, right? So we have the vanity metrics, such as clicks, the completion rates, just to have something done and say, yeah, they did that. But many still feel we haven't unlocked its full potential. So why is it so hard to turn this data into meaningful insights about learning? Dipesh, I'm going to turn it to you first.
So I'll answer that. I will also just go back a little bit and to top up Luyen's answer. I think a lot of learning doesn't happen Unfortunately, standardized tests have made us think that the learnings happen when you give an answer. A lot of learning actually happens during that struggle of learning and understanding. And that's what multimodal AI enables you to see somebody when somebody's struggling. Yeah, that's just wanted to add to that bit. That's why multimodal is so important. To answer your question, I think it's the intent of how we collected the data, right? So if the intent is compliance, then the data is going to just do that compliance bit, and that's what is happening today. The intent is, okay, we need to comply, we need to have this. But if the intent is understanding behavior, then the data collection becomes very different. So that's, I think that's number one. The number two issue is the data is so disparate in different systems and not there for actionable use. And that's why we see that we have so much data, but at the same time, we don't have data. So I think it's the intent. Like, what is the intent of this data? It is the various systems over the years, which is causing that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I like that idea of intent behind it because I know, especially when it comes to business, we talk about buyer intent. Why don't we have like this educator intent signal? So I'm just gonna put that for out there and turn it over to you, Luyen.
Yeah, I agree with what Dipesh said. I think the other thing to think about is, um, we're coming from successive generations of being hampered by both very poor access to data and where data collection is very expensive. So, you know, we didn't design standardized tests, to use Depesh's example, as the perfect data capture of student learning. We designed it to be the most efficient capture of something that could be at least broadly meaningful. And so it's more a technical limitation than it actually is an ideal design that addresses the educator intent. We're also hampered by the fact that even with a fair amount of data, the ability to use technology to help us to draw the right insights out of that data is extremely limited as well. And one of the things that's so exciting to me about multimodal modal AI is that it solves for both of those problems. It allows you to capture events, capture nuances and signal, what I call signal, turn it into data incredibly efficiently. So my little raise of my eyebrow can be captured in a way that you would never be able to capture traditionally with a standardized instrument like a multiple choice test. But yet that, and then in addition to that, these multimodal models are, and these underlying large language models are incredibly effective at taking those subtle, tiny little cues and providing really rich correlations and causal
Mhm.
relationships out of all of that. And so you have this sort of multiplying impact of much better, higher quality, richer data with much deeper insights thanks to large language models.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's again all back to this idea of the context that we're taking into it that maybe the educator doesn't catch because they're attending to another student or they're explaining a concept. So I think this is a really good benefit of that multimodal AI data. However, I do want to address quickly this idea of privacy concerns just because I know there was a release in new technology recently from someone in Europe, maybe Germany, about like a face shield people are now going to potentially wear to prevent the AI scanning from getting facial recognition. How does this come into play in terms of privacy protection and facial recognition when it comes to AI and multimodal data?
I can jump in first on that, Depeche. I'm sure you have thoughts too. I mean, I think it is definitely something I think about a lot, and even as a consumer of AI systems and computing systems, I worry about, personally quite a bit. But I think the what I've learned is that privacy and personal privacy and tolerances around privacy and data capture are not a static or a binary phenomenon.
Mhm.
They are actually a cost benefit equation. Um, for better or for worse, most of us in the world gave up enormous amounts of privacy to be able to reconnect with old high school friends, or stay in touch with loved ones and celebrate people's birthdays. And now one may argue that we as consumers, we're not fully aware of what we were giving up in order to gain that benefit. And so I'm very committed with DeweyLearn, our company, to being incredibly transparent about how we use data, how we use things like facial recognition. But I think it's equally important to be articulate and clear about what the benefit of someone providing that information actually is. And so our experience, this is just, learned experience, has been that when we go and show a partner or talk to a partner about partnering with us, and we show them what do we learn can help them learn, the barriers and the concerns about privacy are diminished. The typical attitude is, I need that. What do we need to make that happen? And how do we do it in as protective a way as possible? If I go into a partner meeting and say, so we're going to bring in a bunch of cameras and we're going to use an AI system that's going to, suck all the insights out of the people in the room, you never get through the sentence, right? But you have to lead with value and be transparent about what the trade-offs are in order to get that value.
Yeah. And I would 100% agree with that. I think the best example that comes to my mind, which kind of changed my thought process towards some of this was, I mean, Luyen, you travel a lot, I travel a lot. And at the airports, if you see, there is this always this disclaimer that you're going to take your photo, the photo will be discarded after certain, whatever, right? I think just that having that information that I'm going to take your photo, it is going to be discarded or whatever,
Mhm.
right? And there is a reason I know this is being done for my safety.
And
So I call it like nutrition labels in AI. I think if we can provide like, okay, what is the purpose of this? What is the benefit of doing this? And so that way the consumer is informed. And in this case, consumer is learner and the parents, or depending on the age. I think just having that informed information, showing the value of why this is being done, and then having proper policies in place of how the data will be handled after the process. I think that will be a step in the right direction. If you skip on that, that obviously is a red flag. So I think, Rian, what you mentioned is so relevant to show the benefit of why this thing is being captured.
yeah, so it's sort of like informed consent data collection and AI usage. Yeah, I like that. And as you were even saying, like this context around it, we're talking about whole context with multimodal data and AI. Like, it's the whole context of why you need that collection in order to make it possible. So I like this
Yeah.
transparency. This is always a big concern for anyone anytime we talk about AI. Feel like it's always that and
Yeah.
privacy. But going back to the use of this technology, what are the principles that should guide how we implement and use the technology in any learning environment for any age?
I mean, I think that's a great question. I think in my view, there isn't necessarily a one size fits all answer to that. And I think, as you were saying, AI is becoming pervasive. Even what we mean by AI versus generative AI, um, multimodal AI. AI. I don't know if you saw my old high school classmate. Uh, did a article for the New York Times recently where he tried to go, I think it was like 48 hours without using anything that was AI
Mm.
infused, and discovered that he basically had to live on a desert island, like in
Oh, wow.
handmade clothing, because everything was AI, infused. And so I think it's a little bit, like when people used to talk about things like data, right, or computing, there is nothing that isn't actually significantly infused with these technologies. I think there's a questions around, how do we want students to be using the technology? How do we want educators to be using the technology? How do we scaffold student usage of it over time? How do administrators use it to monitor their teaching staff or their classrooms? Um, and I think these are all complex. Each one of these kind of comes back to the previous point. You have to have a clear value negotiation and discussion around each of those transactions. And I think I talked to educators a lot about student use, for instance. And I know that's not exactly what we're talking about here, but academic integrity is top of mind for so many educators. Their immediate response to ChatGPT when it first came out in the fall of 2023 was that it's the ultimate cheating tool, right?
Mm,
And I think you know many of them went too far in the direction of saying it's restricted. You can't you don't permit students to use it at all. And I think over time, what many teachers have realized is that uh, their students are going to use it, but and that's okay if it's in the loop, but that ultimately it's the student who is the final part
mhm.
of that process and puts his or her own stamp of approval on the output that it's theirs, and they can defend it and validate it. And I think the same is true with a teacher. I mean, I talk to teachers, who were building entire curricula without even checking it, just hitting, putting a prompt into ChatGPT, outputting it and teaching in the classroom, and then quickly discovering it had all sorts of flaws or mistakes in it. And I think increasingly the educators I work with understand it's a tool that allows them to do more than they could do before, but they are just as much needed to vouchsafe the quality of the output as they were in a pre-LLM era.
Yeah, I mean, I one of the things that I always look for learning is, and there are different terms. I think learning efficacy is a big one, but I think of is at rate of learning. Has anything improved the rate of learning for the student? What do you
Really?
mean by rate of learning? Like, if this thing with the kind of struggle would take X amount of time, can the student learn more contextually? And I think that's where I see AI helping. And that I think that is one of the important things when I look at even my kids, right? Does it improve? And I've seen that it improves their rate of learning more than other things. So that's one. On the teacher side, I think I really like your point, Luyan. I would say that I've not been a teacher in a formal setting, but I have been in an informal setting, and I've been like, there was a class where there was a teacher, and I was just there to. The teacher told me that, hey, you just look at the behavior of students. I'm going to be teaching, and just by observing those students, I gave that teacher time to focus on something that was more important to her. And I think I see AI as that, like, teacher can spend more time on things that he or she are most valuable at, and then can AI do the things that they shouldn't be needing teacher time? It's a similar thing in sales. Like, can sellers spend more time selling rather than doing admin tasks? Similarly, can teachers spend more time working with students, understanding their struggles rather than going back filling the forms? So I don't know. I mean, maybe I went all around, but I think I tried to answer your question. But I hope that that was my point of view on this.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say you kind of also started going into the next question, Dipesh, in terms of the strengthening component with the human connection that's as a result of implementing the multimodal AI. So, what does that look like beyond just? I know we always say like, oh, it helps them spend more time with the students and offload administrative tasks. What else does it do beyond those two points?
So I'll give you my example as a parent, right? I get my kid. My kid is in second grade now. I get his homework sheets at the end, and I get some scores, and that gives me some information. But the real value comes when I sit with him and when I see him multiply
Mhm.
3 by 7, and I see how he processes that, like how much time he takes, like squares, right? That's where I'm like, okay, he got the answer, but I think he's struggling here. And this is where I think this is the conceptual issue that I need to work on with him. And then I spend more time, okay, why are you so concerned? Like, why are you taking longer for squares? Not that it's a problem, but I just want to understand that better. I don't think I will ever get that information by just looking at the sheets and looking at the scores, right? So I think that's the power of that multimodal, where you can say, okay, like you said, Luyan, eyebrow raise, or spending more time on, okay, what is going on? Is there a conceptual gap over there that can be filled? And maybe you don't need to fill that gap. I'm just saying. So that kind of information is absolutely going to be missed if we don't have those kind of things. That's my take on this.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I mean, I think as Depeche knows, we work with an online culinary school called Escoffier, and the homework that students do, these 8,000, almost 8,500 fully online students, most getting college degrees in culinary arts. Their homework is submitting photographs of the stages of their preparing a homework meal, making a roux, showing their cutting technique, showing that they know how to julienne versus cube a carrot. And right now, human instructors who are trained chefs, grade those photographs against a rubric.
Mm,
What we found was that that probably takes 30, 40, maybe even 50% of the instructor's time
yeah.
to grade this homework. And it's incredibly valuable because until recently, only an experienced chef could look at a photo of that and say, yeah, that's the proper technique. That roux is the right consistency. We trained an AI to be able to provide that feedback. The human instructor is still in the loop. They still validate that the scoring and the feedback is correct. But the vision is it should return time to the educators to do the much more impactful human work of interacting one-on-one with students instead of with their homework.
Mhm.
And so I think it's a great example of where it may seem a little bit paradoxical, but I think machines can actually help us become more human again if we deploy them properly.
Absolutely. I just on that, I saw a report, and when the cars insurance, they used to earlier have the humans do the issue, and like you said, photos, and there would be reviewers doing that. So companies have started using AI, and AI is doing much better job at analyzing the damage, coming up with the cost, and that gives the people over there ability to then save their time on more important tasks. So exactly like you mentioned, Luyan. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it brings up an interesting topic, which you kind of touched on, Dipesh, earlier, which is it is potentially pointing at a change in the competencies and requirements of educators. You now need educators, or for that matter, insurance adjusters who are comfortable with, skilled in human interaction. And that is not necessarily what industries have hired for, including the teaching industry. And so this will have societal impacts and labor market impacts over time for sure.
Yeah. I kinda like the point that you said in terms of the machine's gonna make us be more human, because I feel like been having a lot of conversations with people of the fact that with these AI companions and the ability to make your bubble more personalized, do people really feel the need to go beyond that bubble that AI is creating for them to have those human interactions? So it's a deeper question. We won't get into that one. But I do see like how the machine intervention and the data collection could help people become more inclined to having that human interaction, because maybe they feel more confident in that. Oh, that gesture means that they're open to chatting. So then I can take the initiative to start the conversation rather than like, I don't know how to read body language. So I like that. That's a little bit of a positive. We're going to end on hopefully another positive note with our last question, talking about the future, which, like, we always used to say 5 years out, but I feel like that's even hard to say now these days. So, we're going to say maybe even in the next 1 or 3 years, what do you think this multimodal AI will do as it becomes more common? And what should we be excited about? What should we be cautious about? In terms of the actual product and then also implementation.
I mean, I think, to me, the hope and my belief and conviction is that um, these sorts of technologies can make highly personalized learning and human to human interaction uh, much more scalable than ever before in history. That it will allow us to finally escape the orbit of kind of what I call the industrial age factory model of education, to a form of education and learning and teaching that is deeply, deeply personal and human, because we will be able to automate away so many of the things that actually distract us from being able to have those human connections, and provide the quality of insights and the confidence in insights uh, in human educators and human learners that allow us to have much, much more impactful and meaningful conversations about a learner's journey.
Love
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I don't know. This is my hope. I don't know it's happened in 1 year, 3 year, or 10 year. But like they say, you have people great at interviewing versus doing their job. I think it's the same for test taking. I think you have great test takers and you have nervous test takers doesn't mean anything about their learning ability. I was one of the nervous test takers, and that like last minute wrong answer, and that one wrong answer could have probably not let me get into a particular institution of my choice, for example, right? My hope is that can we and get rid of would be a big bold thing, but can we have assessment as a part of learning rather than having these then when having people who are specialized in test taking versus the rate of learning that I mentioned up earlier. So just because got 2 marks lesser than somebody else doesn't mean that I cannot do this particular course. Like I'll give you an example. It was so I studied in India. It was so competitive there that if you did not get 1 mark, 2 marks, so I changed. I wanted to do medicine. I actually did not get a seat in medicine because I got 2 marks lesser than the cutoff, and I ended up doing physical therapy. Now,
Mhm.
I'm proud of what I did, but I'm just saying, right? Did that 1 or 2 mark determine that I am not good at this? Is that the right benchmark? Right? Is that the right way to measure people? I think my hope is that with multimodal, can we measure students' learning as a part of the process rather than having them to go through this time bound rigorous, nervous, nerve-wracking, anxiety-inducing
Mm,
experience at the end of the learning process.
yeah. Yeah. And I think it goes back again, if we zoom out to this whole bigger conversation of the context with learning, with assessments, taking in all the information and data to help reach the decision point or maybe guidance into the career path, anything. But I think what we could say is it's all about context, transparency, and taking in as much data to be as personalized as possible in a student's life.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think it's great.
I love it. Well, any final points that either of you would like to add? Maybe catchphrases, wishful thinking?
I think we're in an incredible time of experimentation and innovation, and we have tools, for those of us who have been, working in technology and particularly in educational technology for a long, long time. I don't think we ever anticipated we would live to see a time where we have the tools at our disposal that we all of a sudden have. And, you know, um, I used to teach philosophy. I was a philosophy major in college, and my uh, you know, I often say my favorite philosophy comes from Spider-Man. The famous slogan, "With great power comes great responsibility." And I think that, have these conversations are important. I'm glad that you're doing it today because I think we have great power today, and we need to figure out how to deploy it in the most responsible and beneficial way possible.
Yeah, and for me, I think the only thing I would end is I think it has made the biggest skill that you can have today is the power of unlearning and the humility to know that what you did may not exist tomorrow. So I think that mindset of unlearning
Mhm.
everything, maybe everything, or a lot of things from the past, as the future is going to be very, very different. So that's my final thought.
Yeah, both very good points. I think this is a good place to end it on. I want to thank you both for coming onto this call to have the discussion with me about multimodal AI and all of this data interpretation in the new age of AI. And I want to encourage our listeners to tune in, share their thoughts on multimodal AI, and to remember, stay curious. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.